demonic angel. Today I'm going to do the King of Cups. He's a real interesting guy. One of my favorite court cards, of all time actually, because he does remind me of the historical figure, Dr. John Dee. And he was Queen Elizabeth, the one who died in, I think, 1602. He was her astrologer, court magician, and he helped her plan things from the mundane to the, big conquests, things like that. And he was different in the sense that he would, contribute to the Christian church, but behind, closed doors, he taught the queen all about astrology. And the way that it pertains to this card, he came up with some ideas like manifest destiny. He really wanted Western values to be expanded as far as possible, and things like that. He saw that as fate. But when other countries were doing things, competing, because there really was this pickup in competition with France and Spain, and even though the waters are turbulent, he would say, hey, we need to send our sailors now out because according to the charts, things are going to get really, really good soon, and there's going to be calm waters, so there's nothing to worry about. Have faith and send our men out. And, when the other people, of course, would not do so because the waters are turbulent, he would look into astrology. And that is kind of this idea, too, that even though I'm a hereditary witch, and I'm just playing with all these different systems, I learn so much from each thing that it just brings more of a depth each time to my life, and that understanding. I used to be kind of more of those witches that's like, hey, if I feel like doing a spell, I'll do a spell. And a lot of that is, it's still very true, because if I want to really do something, work on something, I will. But it doesn't, I'll try to line up with, astrology. I'll try to, do kind of grounding spells as the moon is waning. And then as it's waxing, I'll do things like for abundance, because it really does add to that. If, let's say, I left that out, left the, the association with the moon, well, then I don't really get that other benefit of that. But the more layers I add, like candle magic, the correspondences, the color correspondences, and then it really just builds, and it really has enhanced my life as an occultist. So I don't knock it, don't knock, but at the same time, just if you feel like doing a ritual, like now is the time for you to do so, then just go with that. And then I guess if you're like me in some way, now I have so many candles, spices, I have a lot of my blood saved in little jars that I have just sealed, and I haven't done anything with, so I can purpose that later on. So I just have a lot of things at my own disposal like that, and that will just make that really neat. But I'll pay attention to astrology more, numerology, things like that. They help a lot. So this guy kind of knows those things, that there's layers. That's what emotions are about, is all these different layers. And his stone throne, it's like with the emperor sits on a stone throne. This is iron, masculine, logic and rule. And it's not just ruling over subjects. I mean, it's also like rule over the family in some way, except, to truly be a ruler in that sense, one must have a great amount of compassion and keen logic. But yeah, much like King Solomon. So with all these different, elements coming into this guy's rich understanding of himself, he does have a little fish amulet, and I like the kind of gold cape because it reminds me of materialism. This guy really, even though he's a king and materialism is at his disposal, because he's got luxury. The fish represents the creativity, that creative spark, creative life. That a lot of Native Americans do not eat fish because they think that is, humans' brothers and sisters, specifically, rather than, let's say, monkeys. It's like the spark, the symbolic of that creative spark of life that came from, manifested out of the waters, that eventually, became human. So that's, a really neat aspect to him. On his crown, he's got red. He's just very traditional and cool looking, and I just love the way that he is. Now, he's not staring at the cup, because most of the people in the suit of cups are staring into the cup, looking at that. That's their, focus. And obviously, as it should be, because this is kind of that suit of cups importance. But this guy has mastered his own emotions so well that he doesn't really need to be looking at the cup. He can if he wants, but he's done what we would call shadow work. He's done these types of things like this that really make him this whole individual. He knows who he is, and that is required of him to rule these subjects. Now, the cup that he's not looking at, this is his emotions and spiritual life. And, since he is such a great king, like these figures I've mentioned, it takes the emotional experience of looking within to really know how to relate to other people's problems. Not just looking at your subjects or your family, let's say, as just a pure logical way, and you don't relate to their, children have different needs and emotional needs than like a woman. And it just depends on like a person who does this for a living, they might need more of more downtime in a different way than this. And it's like picking up on those various things. So it really is just picking up on the emotions of people, and then applying it to the way you feel about yourself, and coming up with this really rich understanding, like going on a bus or something, just watching people and learning about them. That's a really basic way to just learn about people. But he has a scepter in his other hand. That's logic. It's also his obligation to the throne, to his subjects, to hard work, and he accepts this completely. So, he knows, even though he knows his own feelings, he really also he has his logic. So He's not just like going, I feel this way, I'm going to go and let that take me in that direction. This has to go against, critical thinking, and he always applies that. But his acceptance of this responsibility is because he does love his subjects. He loves what he does, actually. He is just a generous, nice person who helps people for the sake of helping people. With, like I said, that kind of comes from just kind of knowing. Verse, this is just a situation where maybe you're not applying the self-love. So if you don't have any self-love for your own self, if you're a man and you don't look at your emotions, you certainly won't be able to relate to your family, to your co-workers, because we're animals, and that means that we're all emotional. So that has to be acknowledged in order to understand that. The King of Reversed, the King of Cups reversed is, not applying self-love. So maybe outwardly you're authoritarian, all these things, but deep down there's this self-loathing that's just bottled up, and it's just pressurized, and it's eventually going to manifest and explode because consciousness rises. So, that the way that you really emotionally feel about yourself is very important, and you can't hide. You can lie to all these other people, and it's totally fine, but when you lie to yourself, things, you can't really carry that forever. It's going to manifest as well in your life. But that the negative effects of not, having self-love really translates into not being able to relate to other people and just using your authority. Hey, do this. This guy can be deliberately emotionally manipulative because he does understand people. He knows exactly what to say to basically get people to do what he wants. It's like, hey, I'll never do this again. I need you to do this for me, even though I'm calling you names. And it's like, people who fight, really bad fight, name calling, things like that. And the next day, this guy, he's showing up with like flowers and chocolate. And then the next day, he's like, you're just a loser. And you need to do this for me. If only you worked harder. Just a real loser, emotionally manipulative. But obviously, it doesn't usually mean such a drastic, but that meaning can be there. But for the most part, it'll mean not applying self-love, so that the scepter, this burden that he chooses to carry, I should say, he sees it as a burden. In this scenario where it's upright, this obligation he attends to because he chooses it. Reverse, this is a burden. So he feels like, I do all the work, everybody else, is not, my feelings aren't important, everybody else isn't important, and that's really going to lead to some kind of explosive emotional issues from bottling it in and blaming and just that kind of a mentality of why should I try anyway? I'm fat. Why should I try anyway? I suck. But then that same person will say, well, look at these people, they suck more than me. But it's all just trying to make yourself feel better, but it's not in any kind of positive way. So of course you just end up feeling worse, because that self-love really comes before so many different things on the path to enlightenment in your spiritual journey. But I just thought I'd share some of my thoughts on the King of Cups here. I mentioned King Solomon and Dr. John Dee because You know, these were men who they did understand the emotions of other people. They had their visions, their insights. They did great things they built things. One with his hands, the other with, you know, his mind and scrying. So at the same time, to be a doctor and to be a great king, the logic is really, really there. And you know, the play off of emotion and logic, when it's balanced, it's just tremendous. It's just such a force, because having those two things, you know, you think emotional person and then a logical person don't really exist in the same person, but they sometimes do with this spiritual evolution. You just have to examine each of those things one by one. And if you just feel like, hey, you have too much obligation, you have too much, you need to learn how to express yourself and have self-love. You know, therapy is really good. Start being honest with yourself about, I mean, if you're really feeling that way, figure out how you can feel happy. I know it's scary, but it's well worth it. My next video is actually going to be on astral projection. Black Magic Sorcerer was saying, hey, why don't you do a video on it? And then I have a couple of other people email me asking me questions about astral projection, and I thought, okay, well, I'd really like to get a little bit more specific about some techniques I'd like to put out there, and then, you know, share which ones I've tried. So, you know, my next video will be that, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.